Thank you all for coming to our little tale. And thanks, Luca, for having us, Gene, and letting us come back. We appreciate it. I'm James Koskinas. It's John Witham, Julie Schumer, and it's a three-person movie. So here we are. Here's the whole crew, all of us together. And I want to thank Julie for watching our limited budget, John for shooting the movie and doing just about everything on the film.
Soundtrack,
cinematography, director, lights, art direction. So here we are. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer anything.
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit about the genesis of the project and the ideas of documentary form with the performance structure, with the tag at the end about work of fiction, and where these things in the act of creation were all sort of swirling around each other, and how you were trying to tease out the differences and also sort of meddle with it, confuse the differences?
That's a good question, and we consider this film sort of a hybrid of all those of a documentary and basically a one-man play. And genesis was I had a one-man stage show that was out in Santa Fe for a while, and John saw the stage production, and he's a cinematographer and a filmmaker, and I don't know exactly how it happened, but just over a course of some dinners, we sat around and decided to shoot a movie. And since we had this really forced by our limited budget, we just created our own art form out of what you saw, and combination of a play and a documentary and film combination.
We also wanted to honor what solo artists often do, especially people that work alone, because often they're just in their own space, in their own head, and what's that dialogue like? What are they saying to themselves when they're doing that? What questions come up? What challenges, what problems do they solve? And so James gamely was willing to not only paint the paintings in the show, but to vocalize his experience, his internal process, and his internal conflicts while he's painting. And it was a very impressive thing to witness, to be behind the camera and see him channeling this stuff. We had a script, but he was going through this process as we were shooting, and I was very honored to be able to capture that and put it together so that we could show it.
Quick question. That you kind of touched on what I was about to ask, but was there any kind of rehearsal?
Well, basically it's pretty limited rehearsal. We spent a couple months just shooting footage and while I was working on the script, but no, it was like once we got the script together, we just started shooting, and at first one of the first things we had so many takes that we did this that we figured we'd never get done after we had 30 takes. So we just basically got it down to 1 or 2, 3 shots, and that was it. And then after that, we just went through the whole film.
During the development process, though, we had a core group that James would do readings, and we'd show bits that we were working on. And early on, we had a scene where James was just painting, and it was also where we were experimenting with using some of his poetry to music. And it just happened to come together so well. People loved watching him paint on camera. So then when we developed the full feature, we decided to incorporate more of that, and I think it's some of the most wonderful parts of the film is to just see him go completely into his world and just paint.
The music is such an important part of this. Can you talk about the creation of the music?
Yeah, for one of those test scenes that we showed our test audience, we needed some music, and my composition partner and I had this piece that we already had, and so in order to edit the painting scenes together, I had to put it to some kind of music, make it sort of like a music video. And the response that we got for that was really favorable, and so we had talked about how to get music for the film, and because we were working with such a limited budget, we said, well, we'll just do that. And so that scene worked out okay with something that was already pre-recorded. But then to do the material to accompany the scenes that James had already written, James came over to the studio, and Rusty and I would just sort of improvise some things, and he would kind of walk around and he'd listen, recline on the couch, and he'd say, oh, that's going to grandmother's house, or that's for this scene. And we sort of logged that, and then later we developed those bits into something that was a little more finished production to use in the editing.
Some of what I'm hearing strikes me as fascinating. James, obviously you have a background in theater. The other two of you, because this process that you're talking about is very atypical the way that films are made. To sort of make some, show it, make some more, show it, and figure out what people are responding to and how to craft it outside of, say, the Hollywood form of finish the whole thing and then show the whole thing. This is a much more organic structure, more like you would think of in terms of developing a one-person show, where you're getting sort of feedback from the audience, community routines, that kind of thing. So how much, besides James, how much of the other two of you come out of the theater and are sort of using that model?
I have zero theater experience. I'm a criminal defense lawyer and an artist. And I was sort of the den mother of this whole thing and kept it on track. But we were able to do it that way because there's only just us.
Yeah.
We didn't have to answer to anybody particularly. I mean, they kind of had to answer to me in terms of the timeline, but we didn't have to get approval from anybody for anything. We could just do whatever we wanted to do, which made it a lot easier to have that more homegrown approach where we solicited our fans' input periodically. And we did it on several occasions, and people really liked being a part of that.
And I had a production background. I'd done a lot of these parts for other films or TV and even recording studios too. But it was really gratifying to be able to work on a project where all of that stuff could come together in one creation. And James and Julie really had enough confidence in working with me at that point that they let me do the stuff that we could do.
Well, you had made the little movie for me first. John made an artist video that's about 9 or 10 minutes long about me as an abstract painter, which went really well, and it's been, well received on YouTube, and he did a great job. And so that we had that background with him. We knew that he could do it.
We were forced by our limitations, so we just didn't have any money, and
Not enough money.
not enough money to have like a big crew or any more than 3 of us. And so what we did was we, based on that, we just did the best we could with what we had. I had a theater background and was had done these one-man shows and was confident enough in that aspect. And then John had his part, was confident enough in his part. So it was just basically the 3 of us.
June.
I have a question for the artist. Just how did you get them safety pins in that painted canvas?
What did you say? How'd you get the safety pins in that?
Oh, that was a lot of work.
I know.
I got it all back together though. But,
It's a new painting now.
I thought it was kind of cool. You should have put the pins on the other side and kept it.
So was there no, like, pre-production, shooting, post-production type of workflow, or was it kind of like, how long did it take to
You want
start and finish this?
We had about 6 months of pre-production. Part of that was a fundraising effort that returned very modest efforts or results, and part of it was developing this fan base of people that we could do feedback with. But the project evolved and changed quite a bit over the course of that time. Initially, it was going to be much more similar to James's one-man play, have a lot more Vietnam stuff in it. And then we sort of changed that a little bit more to be the story of the artist as a Vietnam vet, and let that be one of many of his motivational and challenging aspects of personality that he was working through. So we tried several different starts, and at one point we were going to make it even really more minimal than it was, but we decided we needed some of these paintings and some of the decoration to change in the set, rather than have it just be a black box and a guy doing a monologue, which I think would have worked, but it wouldn't have been the same piece. And so things like that changed over the 6 months before we. And I think we started shooting about 3 times and changed direction a little bit. And then once we started over, we shot everything in about 2.5 months, and then it was about 700 man hours of post-production to do the music and the editing.
When you say things changed, did it change in concept before shooting, or did it happen as you were shooting and editing?
Before.
Yes.
Because you had a script before you guys really
I
shot
had
the
a
first
script, and
scene.
we'd get off the script, and John would get us back to the script, but
Well, you still were off the script, because after it was done, I went back and watched it like 10 times and rearranged the script to conform to what you guys had filmed. So it kind of went back and forth.
There had to be a bit of spontaneity and improv in it, and because the painting was changing, we had to shoot all the painting things in sequence, because it was he was painting it during, and so based on what he would do with the painting, sometimes that would modify what we would do next. But I think that kept it very organic that way, and gave it a little bit of integrity with that piece of art.
Well, I'd just like to say, first of all, that I think that allowing people to view that process, your process, was incredibly brave. I found myself having a very visceral reaction during that process as the film unfolded. I found myself getting angry at times, like following through that process of the painting and wanting it to be completed. And I, just when it was finished, I felt this like sense of relief, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, like that's the artist process right there. So congratulations, it was a very beautiful film.
thank you.
Thanks.
It is available on Amazon and Google Play, and it's coming to iTunes on November 1st and Vudu on November 1st. So if anybody would care to watch it on that or just rate it, give it a review, that would be terrific.